Have you ever considered changing ownership in your LLC? Well, in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to do that to make sure you maintain the integrity of your limited liability company and you don't put yourself at risk of audit. All right, let's get started. Okay, so you're probably sitting there going, well, why would I ever want to change the ownership in a limited liability company? Hey, I own this LLC, Clint. Why am I going to want to transfer it to someone else? I want to hold on to this forever. Well, there's a lot of situations where changing ownership of the LLC is probably going to come up in your investing ventures. And so most notably, what am I referring to? Many times what we find when we work with individuals who are real estate investors, they will come to us and they have set up a few limited liability companies where they are listed as the member of these LLCs. So a member equals ownership. So let's say you've created two LLCs right here, and you're the member. Now, you've watched some of my videos where I talk about the benefits of using a Wyoming limited liability company for not only enhanced asset protection, but also for anonymity. So these LLCs you've already created that, yeah, your name's associated with them and people that currently reside there know that you're the owner. If you want to change that so people don't know you're the owner, then you're going to want to use this Wyoming LLC down here to become the member in these other upper tier red boxes. So what does that require? That requires that we change who the member is from you to this Wyoming LLC. That's what I mean by changing ownership. Now, it's very simple to do this, but it's very important at the same time that you understand the mechanics in order to transfer this ownership into your LLC, because your operating agreement will describe for you the process by which you can change ownership. Now, why is this important? Well, let's assume that I had this red box right here. It's set up. It's in Minnesota. I own a Minnesota limited liability company. I had an operating agreement drafted by my local attorney, or maybe I just did something stupid and used LegalZoom to set it up. And now I want to move it from my name to this Wyoming LLC. So I use what I talk about, an assignment of interest. Okay, so this is how you transfer ownership. You assign your ownership interest in your red box to the Wyoming LLC. It's pretty simple. You'd say, I, Clint Coons, hereby assign 100% of my ownership interest in the red box LLC to the Wyoming Limited Liability Company. Sign it, date it, notarize it, whatever, and that's it. Now you've transferred your ownership interest. And so then you're walking around, you're feeling really confident about yourself that, hey, I no longer own this red box LLC. It's owned by my Wyoming LLC. So if somebody brought a claim against me, I've got Wyoming protecting me. Well, you better think again, because if that's your assumption, you first have to make sure that this assignment of interest comported with the operating agreement. Now, for example, I'd worked with an individual one time that had transferred their interest into their Wyoming LLC that they had set up. They did all this on their own, and they were involved in a lawsuit. And they reached out to me because they just recently signed up and become a client. So now they had our Platinum service, which allows them to speak with us, and there's no charge. We don't charge an hourly rate when you're a Platinum client. And so I'm speaking with them and I'm reviewing the documents. And I said, so you transferred your interest? He goes, yeah, I watched your videos. I assigned the interest just like you talked about. In fact, I downloaded a form that you provided. I don't remember when I did this, but when you cut several hundred videos, you're bound to throw some nuggets out like this. So anyhow, he had gone through and he followed the steps. But what he didn't realize when I looked at it is that there was a very specific mechanism that was required in order for it to be a valid transfer. And here's my concern. He thought that his interest was protected by the Wyoming LLC. And what I showed them is that just by doing the assignment of interest, that was not sufficient. That in order to transfer the interest, the manager of this LLC right here had to approve the transfer. And he did not have an approval from the management, this entity. Yes, he's the manager, but it has to be written out. Now, this is what a creditor, I explained to him. I said, listen, if they're going to come after you, they're going to say that that transfer is invalid. It's void because you never got the manager's approval. And he tried to say, well, I'm the manager. I'm the member. I said, I get it. And you could say, yeah, you approved it just by signing the transfer. but they're going to argue that you didn't go through the necessary steps to do this. So oftentimes it requires a vote of the membership as well. It requires a resolution from the manager to transfer that interest. Some of them even require a transfer fee be paid. So when you transfer your interest into an LLC like this, the mechanics is an assignment of interest. But make sure you're following the directions of your upper tier entity that you're assigning so somebody could not potentially void that transfer. Now, at Anderson, we were able to work around this for our clients because we know their LLCs are going to get transferred into various entities over time. So we build in a clause that states that any transfer from a member to the member's spouse, their children, to an entity where they hold a 50% or greater interest, to a trust, is considered to be a permitted transfer and does not require the approval of the members or the manager to make that transfer. So we get in front of it by putting language in there that protects our clients should they transfer their interests at a future date from having to go through any additional steps, so that would not be voided. So this is a common scenario that comes up where people will take LLCs and they want to move them into a holding company. Asset protection is one reason. Maybe they want to minimize the number of tax returns they're filing. A lot of different reasons why they like this structure. Now, there are other reasons why people may transfer an ownership interest as well. And in those situations, it typically looks like something like this. You have a limited liability company, and you're the current owner of that, and you realize, hey, this has a lot of value inside of this business. And what you would want to do is you want to start bringing in your children to make them owners of the company. So you want to transfer ownership interest over to them. So if you're going to do this and bring in outside your family members into your LLC, then yes, you'll go through the exact same process I just described with the assignment of interest to these children in this case. So I would assign, maybe I wanted to assign 15% to my son and 15% to my daughter. So I'm going to transfer them 30%, combined 30% interest to the two of them. Why would you do this? Well, estate tax reduction would be one, okay? You want to reduce your estate, the value of your estate for not necessarily federal estate taxes, but state. See, federal estate taxes, over 24 million you can pass on if you're married, but your state, Washington state here, it's a little over 2. I mean, they have a significantly reduced amount. So now you want to get it in front of this. And you're like, I need to start moving the value out of my estate over to my beneficiaries today. So if that's what you're looking at doing, things to consider in transferring over to them is that, first off, do you want them to own it outright? Because if you don't want them to own it outright, where then they'll have control over that interest, one thing to consider doing is placing it in a trust where they're the beneficiaries. So you can be the trustee of this trust. So you still control the interest, but they are considered the beneficial owners of that interest. So that's one option I would look at if you want to be in that situation. You don't want them to own it. Now, why wouldn't I want my kids to own it outright? Well, maybe I'm concerned if they're involved in a lawsuit or going through a divorce. I don't want that to impact my business. So I'm going to use a trust to block any potential creditors from messing with that ownership interest. But beyond just that, the other thing you must consider if you're going to bring children in and transfer interest to them is, what are the terms of your operating agreement state? This is even more critical. So the terms of your operating agreement need to specify who's in control of this company and what rights these members have down here, meaning what decision-making control, if any, they're going to have. Oftentimes when we set up LLCs, when we're just thinking about us as being the members, we're more free with giving ourselves as members complete control over a lot of decisions in that company. Well, when we bring in other people to this company, say our children, I don't necessarily want to get their approval to do things, so I may have to go back and revisit that operating agreement, and before I make the transfer, I need to restate it, change it. Maybe you set up 2 classes of interests, one voting and one non-voting interest, and so initially you would own both, and then you gift your children the non-voting interests so that they cannot have a say in how the business is being run. So you still run it, but they own 30% of it. Another thing to consider is how the income is distributed, right? You're doing this because you want to reduce the value of your estate for estate tax purposes in my example, but you still need the income. Well, you ought to specify that in the operating agreement that all the income will be distributed to this member, being you. These guys get the growth, but not the current income. So in transferring these assets or transferring interest in an LLC, it's not as straightforward as sometimes people make it out to be. You have to analyze what the objectives are for the parties to make sure that you don't find yourself in a situation where all of a sudden you're being told by your kids how to run your own business. Now, the last thing I don't want to mention on doing any of this is what about the operating agreements themselves? So I watched a video not too long ago on YouTube from a competitor where they said, well, after you transfer the interest into or sign the interest of your LLC to your holding company, you need to restate your operating agreement to make sure that the holding company is listed as the member, like I showed you. Well, I don't necessarily agree with that in restating the operating agreement when you're transferring to a holding company to show the holding company as a member. And the reason why I say that is because that operating agreement that had you originally listed on it, okay, should you need to show it to a bank, many times it's better to have your name showing up there initially and not the LLC that now holds it, because that just complicates the lending process with that institution. So I want people to think that, hey, it's just me, or even opening a bank account, and they don't see the other Wyoming LLC down below. So what I'll do is I'll have the client sign the assignment transferring the interest, but I won't update the operating agreement to reflect anything until such time as we know that we're past any banking decisions that need to be made with that company, so we don't complicate the process going forwards. So those are some things you should look at when it comes to assigning the interest in your LLC. And by all means, this is not something you should attempt on your own without obtaining legal guidance and moving this in, because as I stated, it can be a little bit complicated when it comes to analyzing your existing company to make sure that that transaction is not voided should you find yourself in a lawsuit in the future and somebody's trying to get after your assets. Guys, if you like this video, be sure to do me a favor and hit that like button to help drive up the YouTube ratings, and I wish you all the very best with your investing.